You're listening to the Dudes and Dads podcast, a show dedicated to helping men be better dads, husbands, and men by building community through meaningful conversation and storytelling. And now, here are your hosts, Joel DeMott and Andy Lehman.
Well, here we are, Andy, episode 3.
We are. I can't believe it's episode 3 already.
You guys, we just want to thank you. We're off to an exciting start, and we want to say a big thank you to all the support we've been getting through social media, Instagram, Facebook, on our website over at dudesandadspodcast.com. Thank you, everyone. And we especially want to send out a real special thank you to our first Patreon members. Andy,
yes.
Tell us more.
So our friends Scott and Jesse became our first Patreon ever. We want to thank you, Scott and Jesse, for helping support this show, keep it on the air, all 3 episodes here that we've had. But,
right.
You know, we do thank you guys sincerely from the bottom of our heart. And if you guys want to join Scott and Jesse and become Patreons of our show, you can actually head over to dudesanddadspodcast.com/support. That will forward you on to the Patreon. And you can little amounts, but every little bit helps. And so we appreciate Scott and Jesse for being our first Patreon ever.
Scott and Jesse, if we had a Dudes and Dads award, I don't know what that award would look like, but you would be getting it. So
right,
thank
exactly.
you. Thank you so much, guys. We appreciate you. So Andy, we're off here today. Last week, obviously, we heard from our good friend Clarence as he shared his story, and man, what a great guy. I appreciate him coming in and just all the things that he did have to share. But today, it's back to you and I, and the reason that we're just the two of us in here this week is because this is the 5th anniversary of the loss of your daughter, Macy.
It is.
And we honestly want to take time to just to hear from you, Andy, today, to share your story, to share the memory of your daughter. And we honestly believe, for those of you guys listening, that while this is, we try to keep it light and fun and encouraging, but we believe, and while this is, serious content that we're talking about here today,
this is part of our life.
Absolutely part of the life, and we think it can be encouraging and helpful to some of you out there, or maybe some of you know people. Actually, the chances are good that somebody out there knows someone who has lost a child or has gone through a grief process, and it's sometimes hard to know how to come alongside of them, what to do, and so we just want to share this story with you because we think it will be helpful to somebody out there. So without further ado, Andy, let's just kick it off by
Sure.
Just diving in to your story
Okay.
as we look back 5 years. This week, what was life like? What was going on? Kind of what led to this
Sure.
big event that really changed the life for you and the rest of your family?
Well, first off, I'm going to say I'm not going to tear up a little bit. Even 5 years from now, like as I was doing research, not research, but bringing back up the dates and stuff, I was starting to tear up. So
Yeah.
Here it goes. So 38 weeks pregnant. My wife was 38 weeks pregnant on April 10th, 2014. And she had a minor stomach bug. We were in the process of moving houses. And so, we were doing a lot of work. She had this minor stomach bug. She noticed that Macy wasn't moving nearly as much as she had in the past. And so she really didn't think much about it because she was, again, 38 weeks pregnant. And we've had 3 other kids, and we knew that kind of happened. You get to near the end, and things slow down. So we had been and we'd also been to the midwife just 3 days before that, and Macy had a super strong heartbeat of 136 beats per minute, and nothing. We didn't notice anything like that. So on the 11th, a day later, we still noticed that there was her movements are still really slow. Didn't really notice much. So Julie decided to sit down and do a kick count and only had about 3 movements during that time. So she called the midwife, and the midwife said, hey, I want to take you in for a non-stress test. Go to the hospital. Probably nothing, but let's do this non-stress test, and we'll see what's going on. So we headed in there, and the nurse hooked her up to the fetal monitor, but she searched and couldn't find a heartbeat. Thought that was weird. I kind of noticed that right away. Julie was wanted to believe everything was fine, and so
Sure.
didn't really notice it much, but in my head I was like, hey, this is kind of weird. Why can't she find a heartbeat? 3 days ago she had a strong heartbeat and she could find it just fine. So what's up with that? So she couldn't find the heartbeat, so she flagged down the doctor that's part of the same practice, and she came in to do an ultrasound, or he came in to do it with an ultrasound machine, and searched and searched and searched, just like the midwife did. And I'm never gonna forget those words that he said. He said, "You're not gonna like this, but your baby doesn't have a heartbeat. I can't find you. Like, there's no heartbeat there." So we called our parents, and then we had to figure out what exactly we were going to say to our kids. Like, our kids were staying with Julie's parents, and our kids, we needed to tell them something. They were looking forward to, at that time we had 2 boys and 1 girl, and our daughter Reagan was really, really, really looking forward to having a sister. And so we needed to figure out what we were going to say to her. And so then one day later, on April 12th, 2014, at 10:02 p.m., Mason was stillborn. Julie delivered her. We called you guys right away. You guys were out of town with another group of our friends. We weren't there because we were expecting a baby, and so we called you guys and said, "Hey, like, we just had this baby that was born still." And you guys dropped everything. In fact, I think you left in the middle of dinner from wherever you were at.
Yeah. And I remember, because we're sitting in a restaurant up in Grand Rapids. It's Jackie, my wife Jackie, and I, and our friends Matt and Courtney and Kim and Brian, and we're sitting in a restaurant, and we knew you guys were into the hospital, and we hadn't heard anything, and so I think we got a hold of. We got a hold of Julie's mom, and it just said things didn't look good, and so we're all of the ladies step out of the restaurant real quick. Outside there's like a patio area, and they come back in, and it's just very, very clear that like something was not right, and just kind of look on their face. And so they told us what had happened, and so that was the beginning for us of, we got everything back in the cars, and we headed down, not really knowing just not knowing what to expect.
Right. And so we did call our kids in, and we sat them down. They gave us a good place, like a conference room there in the hospital, and they gave us that room to sit and talk. And like, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, is to tell my kids that their sister was no longer living. Luckily, the hospital gave us 24 hours that we had with Macy, so we got to hold her body, and we got to paint her fingernails and do all those things, and make all of those memories that we were going to make. Yeah. We had to make them in 24 hours. And then the funeral director came, got Macy, left, and then we left. So that's the gist of the story there. I know you guys were super instrumental in that. Like, you guys came around our family and were there for us right away. Some of the thoughts that were going through my mind when I knew that I lost Macy, just like as a dad, like, I broke inside. Mm-hmm. Like, you never think that that's going to happen. Sure. You never think that you're going to lose a kid at all, but let alone right then. And like, so like all of the thoughts went through my head. Like, I'm never going to get to give her away at a wedding. I'm never going to get to, take her for softball, or take her for whatever, or take her for her driving test. I'm never going to get to do those things that as a dad you get to do. And so those are some of the things that first kind of went through my head. And like, I remember thinking, like, even at first, like, okay, so like, what does this mean? Like, okay, I know that, some of people that I know have had miscarriages, and I mean, obviously that how you go to the doctor and that whatever, but like, I'm like, what do we do? Like, do I need to buy a cemetery plot? Do I need to buy a headstone? Like, I didn't know any of those things. I was completely ignorant of what to do. I didn't know what to do. So yeah, that was kind of the first things going through my head.
And for you guys, to be in a place where you could just grieve and didn't, because all of a sudden there are all these decisions that have to be made. Or like you're saying, like, how do we bury a stillborn child? What is that different than a regular burial, and what's the timeline on all of this, and how what does a memorial service look like? And Andy, I think it'd be interesting if you could share, because you guys were so, like, from my perspective, you guys were so intentional about capturing the memories that you could capture, specifically through photographs of Macy, and those are photographs that are still shared in your home, that are all over, that are and not in a morbid way, but in a like, I experience it as like in a celebration, like as I know you guys. But what were your thoughts about that, just in terms of like how you were capturing her memory and the things that you did intentionally about with that?
Sure. I think, like, one of those things that, like, I don't know that I knew right away what to all. I mean, I think we had a lot of good friends that said, hey, you want to have these memories, you want to have your friends capture these memories. And we had a friend we have a friend who's a photographer, and he came in and did those. And I know that was really tough for him, but yet he did that for us. And I think that, like, that meant everything for us. And I know it's weird, like, unless you've lost a kid, like, you don't understand, like, how that affects you, like, having those pictures and having the things, those memories. Like, she's hanging on our wall with the pictures of the rest of our kids.
Right.
And for the longest time, like, anytime we took a family picture, we took her picture with us and put it in the picture.
Right.
Or a stuffed animal or something that represented her. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I think, like, even though we had only those quick 24 hours with her, we still made the most of it. And we I don't know, like, one of the things that you'll be told if you ever are experienced or are around anybody who's lost a child, you'll be told, like, say my child's name.
Right.
Say my child's name. It's important. Like, you're not going to cause me any more grief.
Right.
Like, I know I lost this child, but, like, she is just as much a part of our family as Micah, Eli, and Reagan at that time.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, she was just as much a part of that. Like, she is still a part of our family. And so, like, for us, those memories and those pictures were all that we had. Like, you know, for the rest of my kids, we've got pictures every year. And, like, I don't take pictures for granted anymore. Like, those are all I have. And so, like, for me, like, that's what I had to do that.
Yeah. And being somebody that's coming along, you know, coming alongside of someone in grief, and this was very new territory for all of us. Of us 4 couples that have been close now for 13, 14 years. Of the 4 couples, 2 have experienced miscarriage, and then you guys also, with losing Macy. These conversations of loss have come up in over the course of time. But what I have just found so powerful is the ability to name those things and to talk about them, and not hope that they just kind of disappear, or that those memories just kind of fade away, or whatever. And it, quite honestly, it feels a little strange at first, like that we talk about Macy still to this day is a freeing and beautiful thing now. But at first, that is the concern. I mean, just like you said, am I going to hurt Andy and Julie more? Because you don't understand, like, how are they experiencing it? Am I going to hurt them more if I bring their daughter up? And what we have found is it's just been quite the opposite, actually, that part of the healing process and part of the celebration of her life is, yes, like, she was a person, she was alive, she was a human being. And
right. I mean, we didn't get to experience that outside of the womb, but she definitely was a person, and she definitely has a story. And, like, being a Christian, like, I believe that I'll see her again. And so that to me, that's that hope that I have.
Right. Yeah. And so, you had to sit down with your children, I mean, obviously on that day, and have probably the worst conversation that the hardest conversation that you will ever have to have. like talking about death with kids, period,
Right. It's
is tough.
right.
Right.
But like at that time, Reagan was 4. Like our youngest at that time was 4. She had no idea.
Right. And so over this past 5 years, I mean, to kind of journey through, how have you guys walked with your kids through that grief process? Because my perception has been, especially for like I can remember specific instances with Julie mentioning, like there would be times where like Micah would go to this, like where this grief would come back to him just like it would any of us, and that it would be this like really difficult time, and you're grieving too as a parent,
Right.
but you're trying to help your kid grieve. Like, what does that look like for you guys?
Sure. Well, it's definitely tough. Like that's what I'll say is like it's definitely tough because you have to not only grieve yourself, also support your spouse, and then support your kids. And it's really tough because you can't tell, like, grief affects everybody differently. And it's really hard to tell sometimes with kids, like, okay, are you just acting out? Or are you actually are you grieving? And even the grieving could be part of acting out. And so,
Right.
like, it was tough. We always we always would hear them. Like, we would make sure that they were heard. A lot of times for our one son, like that came out like right at bedtime, like when he was trying to go to sleep, and he would start crying, and he would miss his sister, and so we would just lay down with him. We would cry with him. We would grieve with him, and so I think that like we would make sure that we were taking each grief separately. Like we would know that, like, okay, Micah's gonna grieve differently than Eli, who was going to grieve differently than Reagan. And so, like, for us, like, that's what we did. We allowed each kid to grieve how they wanted to grieve, and we kind of, just made sure that we were paying attention to that.
You met them right where they were individually.
And it was tough because as a parent, you're trying to grieve, and sometimes you have to kind of put that off. Like, you have to even, I don't want to say put it off because that's not what I mean, but you have to allow that to, like, put your grief back a little bit until, like, maybe they're okay with theirs, and then you can grieve. And, like, what we found is, like, our kids would come, and they would, like, if we were crying, they would hug us, they would be there for us, they would pray for us. Like, they were there just as, like, they saw us be an example. The stuff that we did to them, they grieved the same, but they supported us in that same way. So it was really kind of cool.
Andy, I remember at one point, I don't know if you remember the way you described this to me, but as time kind of progressed, and where you were out of the immediate trauma of the loss, but there would just kind of be these ebbs and flows, and how you experienced the loss. You one time explained it to me as like you were like if you were to stand out on the dock of a lake and you see a storm, like as far as how you would experience grief, like you would see the storm coming, like you weren't in the grief right in that minute, but like there was just this sense of like it's going to make it here.
Right, like you could see a wave coming, like you knew it was going to get bad. You knew the storm was going to come.
Yeah. How is there an anxiety that you feel with grief? Like oh no, I'm going into grief again, or like how have you? Because the way you've explained it to me, it was like you can see it coming, and sometimes when we see things coming that we know are hard, it creates this like anxiousness in us in a little bit. I mean, how have you felt and worked through that and thought about it over the years?
Sure. So for me, like, I always loved those. I don't want to say loved. For me, those times that when I could just like bawl my eyes out, like you could, like, it was kind of like releasing a garden hose. Like if you like crank the garden hose and it, like there's pressure behind there and you can feel it, it's coming, but then to let it out and it just sprays everywhere. Like for me, it felt good to release that and let that pressure out. Like, yeah, sure, like it may be building up and it may be building up, but then as soon as I let that go and maybe have a really good cry or something, and I'm an emotional guy, so like I cry a lot, but like when I let that out, it was almost a relief for me, like to be able to, like, even though I knew it was coming, it was a relief to be able to let that go.
Yeah. And the thing that I've just so appreciated and what I've been really grateful for is that you guys have had, well, the willingness to be transparent about your grief and not stuff it down and push it under and not, like, I think my perception is that's how, in part, how you guys have flourished and thrived since the loss, as opposed to going to places that were just like suppressing the reality of the situation. And I just that's been the example to me of, like, that is, I think, the healthiest thing that we can do is call it what it is. That situation sucks. It's terrible. That death is absolutely a terrible thing. We don't try to put like a fancy bow on it or something like that, just to call it what it is. And so that's my perception for you guys, of like that you've been courageous in that area, and then that's been really instrumental in your healing process. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that, yeah. I mean, for us, and especially for us with kids, like, we weren't gonna sugarcoat it. Like, it stinks. They knew that, like, sometimes Daddy was gonna be crying, and like, that's gonna be tough. And as a kid, that's tough to see your parents cry. I mean, you know, I know when stressful things happen, like, as a kid, that's tough to know that your parents are going through things, you know. And even now, like, if one of us cries, like, about anything, like, the kids are like, it's, you know, it's okay, Mom, or it's okay, Dad. And so, like, for us, we had to be open and transparent and, like, grieved as a family, and, you know, tried to, like, I don't know, you guys came alongside of us, you and our friends, our close friends, the ones that were up in Grand Rapids with you guys. Like, you guys came around us and supported us. Like, you knew what we needed when we didn't even know what we needed. Like, you knew how to support us. You knew that we could not plan a funeral.
Right.
And, like, you guys planned the whole, like, like, we came in and said we kind of want, like, this is kind of how we want this to go.
Yep.
But, like, you planned the whole service. Like, you guys got food. You guys got everyone together and things like that.
And I think, you know, for somebody listening out there who is either in the future or is currently alongside someone who's grieving, you just have to put yourself in the driver's seat sometimes, and that can be a hard balance. But people that are grieving are in no place usually to make decisions. Like, that is their capacity for anything like that. And so it's really it's like, okay, and that's how I felt. Like, I felt like we brought the troops together, brought the team together. We said, here's what Andy and Julie need. You do this, you do this, you do this. Kind of directed people in how they were gifted, and then we went after it, and it gave you guys space to do what you had to do. Right.
And honestly, that's one of the best things that you guys could have done for us, because, again, we didn't know what we needed. We didn't know those things. So, yeah, we appreciated you guys.
Yeah, that's man, I've said this to other people. That whole thing we went through, it was an honor to do it, but I hope I never have to do it again.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So, statistically, Andy, the truth of the matter is that couples that go through the loss of a child, the divorce rate is knocking at the door, basically, through an experience like that. So we've said, man, journeying with our kids, bringing them in to that loss, that was a challenge. And then there's you and Julie.
Right.
And Julie as a mom, because there's the emotional component there, but then there's, like, she has everything physically that is going on with her. So it's just this holistic, all of her person is impacted by this loss, and her experience physically is obviously different than yours.
Right.
And so you're trying to come together to meet each other where you can in the midst of grief. What did you guys do to make it through?
We talked. We were open and honest with each other. Like, I think that was the key. Like, we couldn't. Yes, we grieve separately because everyone is going to grieve their own way, but we allowed each other to grieve in those ways. Like, Julie knew. Like, I'm not a person that likes working with my hands. Like, I'm not a skilled like I'm a computer guy. I'm not a big like let's go build something. But like
right.
at that point, like that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be alone. I wanted to like do something like that was constructive because I couldn't fix the fact that my daughter had just died.
Right.
And so like I wanted to fix something. As dudes, we're fixers. We're naturally fixers. So like I wanted to fix something and I couldn't do it. And so like I was outside. And so for me, I found that like she knew what I needed when I needed it. Like she knew that if I was outside for a little bit, let me alone. Not even let me alone. Like she let me do that. But then sometimes she would come out and say, "Hey, like, are you okay?
Right.
You know, like, I know you're grieving, but like, how can I help you?"
Yep.
And the same thing for her. Like, there would be nights that like I would be terrible, and she would just be there and like hug and support me or whatever. And then the next night, she would be in the same boat. Like, she would be needing support. And so, like, we found that talking to each other and supporting each other was one of the biggest things that we could do for each other. Like, talking about it, like, and giving grace too. Like, you know, I may be having a crappy day and I may have like flippantly said something that I didn't mean to, and she gave me grace there.
Yeah.
And so like I think that was part of the key. Like we did that and we did it together, but we did it separately too. You know, so it was like we had this time to grieve separately, but then we also had time to do it together and talk together. And we went on a grief retreat, which Spark of Life. If anyone has ever done this, like, or anyone has ever gone through any type of loss, whether it be stillborn or any type of loss, this is this great grief retreat called Spark of Life.
Yeah.
Sparkoflife.org, and we'll link that in our show notes. But yeah, like that's one of the things that we did, and we found like that was great. A great time to just see and experience and be pampered, but also like learn about grief and learn like people are gonna say things that are awful.
Terrible.
Like
absolutely terrible.
Like they don't mean to.
Right.
They definitely don't mean to. But it's one of those things that you when you experience something so terrible with one of your friends experience something so terrible, you don't know what to say. Like we just don't know what to say.
So this is my public service announcement for anybody who is at the funeral home and is coming up to the people that are grieving. Things not to say. Things like, God just needed one more angel, or, well, what else did you? Oh gosh, I'm just trying to think of the, and I know again they're trying to be helpful, but it's just stupid.
Right.
I'm trying to think of other things. Any sort of platitude of like, here's why God did this, and I just want to give a simple explanation.
Or even like, it's okay because like you can have another kid.
Yes.
Or like,
because it's like, because having another kid will replace the one that died.
Right. She's still part of our family. And,
that's right.
And so like, no. So it just like, I would say, think about it. Like, think if you were in their shoes, what would you want to say to you?
I'm sorry for your loss that's just a great safe thing to say. And as I was helping prepare the memorial service and the funeral, so speaking of like making decisions for the family or whatever, so what I decided is that because there were questions about what had led to Macy's death, what were the circumstances around it, and you guys packed out the funeral home because biggest, and just such a beautiful, like, the community that showed up and was around, like, that was just a really, really beautiful thing. But in my message, I just specifically said, here's what happened.
Right.
Don't ask Andy and Julie about it.
Right.
And, because that was the thing of, like, I don't want you, for 300 times, I didn't want you to have to relive the events again and again. Like, that part was not going to be helpful at that time.
Right.
So that's where it was like there were two things of, one, me trying to head off people saying stupid things to you in the receiving, in the line while you're at the funeral home, and just to give people a sense of like, okay, here's what will be helpful to talk about, and here's what will not be
Right.
helpful to talk about in this time. And you know, and then the conversation has changed. And more, you know, as time goes on, the ability to talk about those things, it does change. But they're just, we got to work on our sensitivity for
Right.
in the moment when you're close to the thing, what has happened, just to be mindful. So yeah, that's my little also side public service announcement for those of you that are at the funeral home. I'm sorry for your loss. A hug. You know, if there's anything you need, just let us know. Like, just encouraging, like, statements that say, we are here, we love you, and that's that.
Right.
So, let's see here. This is really good. Let's see. Okay. So you've said some other things about, just in terms of, like, helping other people understand grief, what are key and you've mentioned this, what are key things to understand about grief, and I think that's been really good. I think the other really important part of this story is that following your guys' loss, your guys' engagement with the organization that is now Hope Mommies, that is part, I think, of such of the redemptive work that has come out of this, is that taking, again, a really crappy situation and a really crappy experience that at the time just seemed like, well, this is a giant black hole that we're going to be living in, to bring you guys through and on this journey. And we still feel the loss. We still recognize it was a terrible thing. But in the midst of that, you guys found yourself a part of a new community of people who had lost children, which is such an underserved and underrepresented group of people, and yet they're everywhere.
Right.
I run into them all the time, and I'm like, I never knew, like, literally, I never knew you lost a child.
Right.
And it just, like, comes up in conversation.
Right.
It's like, you never mentioned
I've known
this.
you for how many years?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, my goodness. And so, tell me, I mean, kind of give if Julie were here, she would, like, she would own this conversation, but give me a rundown of just the Hope Mommies experience and kind of, like, what has come out of that.
Sure. So, shortly after, I don't have notes on exactly when that happened, but like, there was a time that my wife found this organization called Hope Mommies, and they're based out of Texas. And she said to me, like, hey, they're having this annual retreat in like a week. Like, this is like shortly after we had lost Macy. Like, do you want to, like, I want to go. Like, I want to do this. And so, the Hope Mommies helps for people who've lost infants and infants and toddlers and things like that. And so we packed the van, us and all the kids, and we drove from Indiana here down to Texas. And me and the kids just had fun like that week, and it was cool because she was with other moms who have grieved loss of their children, and then learned how to do all got support, got pampering, got all these things. And then me and the kids got to go do lots of fun stuff. Like, we were just out in Texas, and we went to the zoo, and we went to
some weird stuff.
There's
some weird stuff in Texas.
We did. The zoo is a whole nother story, because if you can, I'm going to air quote that, zoo. Anyway, so that was fun. We came back. And then again, Hope Mommies, they have this main conference and things like that. And then they have chapters. Like, and a lot of them were, well, I think at the time, all of them were in Texas. Because, again, it was started in Texas not that long ago. And so Julie's like, hey, I want to do that. I would love to become and have a chapter here in Indiana. And so she helped, became the president of the Northern Indiana chapter of Hope Mommies, which but they do a lot of different things. They have support groups, the Bible studies, and then they also have what they call the Hope Boxes, which are a photo box, which is full of all sorts of pampering items and devotionals and things that help grieving mothers in their time of loss. And so they're like pampering things, and then practical things too, like the Bible and things like that. And so
and how do those moms receive those Hope Boxes?
They a couple different ways. They do contact the Northern Indiana chapter, or they can go into hopemommies.org and they can request a box. Although the chapters fundraise and things for their boxes. And then they have also been able to stock them in some of the hospitals around our area, and some of the doctors' offices and churches and things like that have them to give out to mothers that they come in contact with.
Yeah, and I think that's been the cool thing of the medical community, because they see the need, right? Like that's just something that's,
absolutely.
That's again in front of them regularly, and there's just been so many doctors, hospitals, chaplains, which I think is super cool, that just have welcomed these hope boxes into these places,
right.
And it's kind of like a first line of care that these moms and families receive.
Yeah, so that's been a great and a good outlet, and like again, like the loss of my daughter was one of the terriblest things I've ever experienced, if not the terriblest thing.
Yeah,
and to see hope come out of that, and to see her life not gone, for no reason. Like again, because of that, my wife is able to start this chapter here in Indiana, and then provide hope for other mothers and families who have lost their children too. So it's been, again, I don't want to say great, but it's been a great experience to be able to see not just with Hope Mommies, but also with other things like we were saying, where we have seen people come up to me and say, I'm a dad and I don't have support because, like lots of people are like, hey, how's your wife doing? Yeah. But they don't ask me about how I am. So I've been able to meet with guys. And if you want to talk about this, if you're listening to this and you have lost a child, or you know someone who's lost a child, send us an email, dudesanddadspodcast@gmail.com, and we'll talk. We'll chat. Like I would love to chat with you guys. So like that's been one of the coolest things to see how Macy's life has been able to, what she's been able to do even though she's not here on Earth. Like it's been good.
I don't know, in being the theologian, I don't know the right, because it's theologically sloppy to say this, but her like when we talk about her memory living on, or her impact living on, that there has been that sense like that life didn't just come and go and then that was it, but there was like all these things have come from it. And so it's like we feel like we got to give Macy like a lot of credit for what she's gotten done.
Right. Even though she was like physically, her body was above the earth here for like 24 hours.
Yeah.
Like even though she wasn't alive here outside of the womb, like lots of stuff has been accomplished through her and her life.
And I just got to say, and this is true, Andy, because you married up big time.
You're right. I'm not even going to pretend that that's not true. That's totally true.
Julie is a rock star. What she has done with this, with her and her team with Hope Mommies here in the Northern Indiana chapter, gosh, if you have any heart whatsoever for grieving families and moms that have lost kids, I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities. Even if you yourself have not lost a child, but it's like this something you want to contribute to that ministry, check it out. We'll have obviously all the links and everything in the show notes on the website to connect you guys to that. But I just as somebody I'm just a person that's trying to support and be helpful, just to see what has happened, to see this journey, to see what the last 5 years have been. I am amazed. I really, really am. And I would say this honestly, Andy, I would rather do it with nobody else but you guys.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
And same here too. Like you guys have been an amazing community for us, and like you came around us, and like I really like the idea of just sitting with people who are grieving. Like, don't talk, don't say anything, just sit with them and be with them, be present, experience the grief with them, and just like I really love that idea. And I would encourage people who are coming alongside of people who have lost anybody, not just children, but like parents and grandparents and everything. Just if there's somebody in your life that's grieving, sit with them and be present, because you guys did that to us, like for us. Like you came over to our house, and like the thing that really stunk is, so like we said that April 12th was Macy's birthday. April 17th is Julie's.
Yeah.
And so, like, literally, like, we lost a child, and then we had to try and celebrate Julie's life. And that was really hard. And you guys came over and we had a birthday party.
Yeah.
But, like, it was definitely hard.
Yeah. It's again, it's one of those, that's uncharted territory, right? And you're stepping into things that you've never had to do before, but you're like, doggone it, we're going to do it together.
Right. Right.
And we might, I don't know, we might screw this up, or it might feel awkward, but like, here's the deal. The awkwardness and the weirdness of all of that is what actually like cemented our friendship in a, like in friends, there are not good words for the friendship that we share with myself and Jackie and Andy and Julie and our two friends, our other two couples, Matt and Courtney, and Brian and Kim. There are not words to talk about the relationship and the friendship that we have there. And now, when we all get together, I mean, there's now 15 children,
right.
16 including Macy, like that. It's a zoo. But man, it's just like we have raised our children together. We have been through. There have been miscarriages along the way. There's been, everything. Anybody lost jobs and uncertainty about a lot of things in the future, and moving from places, and all this stuff, and like trying to figure out how to support each other as we're each raising our kids, and they're all good grief so different.
Right.
Ranging from now the 13-year-old down to the 2.5-year-old.
Yeah.
Good night. But man, is it like, for me, it's been one of the most formational things for me to be on that journey. And here's what I desire for all of you. I desire for you to have that kind of deep spiritual friendship, because things will happen in life. Sooner or later, something is going to come your way. And that's what you got to have. You got to have that. You got to have that community. I can't imagine life without it.
Right. And I think, like, if there's one thing that you can take away from this episode, like, I hope that you hear what I'm saying when I say, like, get yourself some really, really close friends. It doesn't need to be superficial. It doesn't need to be whatever, but get friends that you can do life with, both not just as dads and then dudes, but like as a family. Yeah. And I think that like allowed us to just be able to go through this and like deepen our friendship too, because we were good friends beforehand, but now like yeah,
it's like I feel like there's nothing we can't handle. And I think a good litmus test, you're really, really good friends when you can go camping with people. I think that's if you can go camping with your friends, you're a special kind of friend. That's a good test. So, Andy, as we wrap up here, I just got to say, thanks for doing this. I'm so glad you're willing to talk about this, and I really hope it blesses and encourages and helps people out there. I think there's someone that can gain. I have a sense that someone out there can gain something from this.
Definitely.
Closing thoughts, things that you didn't say that you wish you had said, and now is your now on the spot. Here's your last chance.
Oh man, I think man, you put me on the spot. I think that it's tough, and it still is tough. Like grief. If you're in the middle of grief, and you're starting this loss journey, and there are days, weeks, months that are gonna just suck. Those times get less and less as time goes on. There is hope. I don't know how people do this without the hope of Jesus. Like for us, that was the main thing. And again, like our show is not necessarily a Christian show, but both of us are Christians. And like that, just for me, like that's all I can say. Like for me, that's what I don't know that I could do it without that. But like the hurt gets less and less. Never goes away necessarily. Like I wasn't even expecting this, but again, I was looking over the show notes and things and just the timeline of our loss, and was getting teary and getting like goosebumps, and it hurt still to read those words from the doctor saying, "You're not gonna like this.
Yeah.
Your baby doesn't have a heartbeat." But those days are fewer and fewer between, where it just is numb and you can't go on. So that's like, I just want to give you hope. If you're in the middle of that, you hang on. You can do this.
Yeah. There is hope, friends.
Right. So, hey, we want to thank you for listening to this episode. We again, this is our third episode. We're looking forward to seeing more of this type of stuff, more interviews, more just really chatting and having fun. So we want to hear feedback for this. So if you've got feedback about this or any of our episodes, just go ahead and shoot us an email at dudesanddadspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for coming along with this journey with us. Like, I know that this wasn't an easy one. We promised you that there'd be laughing and crying, and you're gonna get both. And so this, like, hopefully you survive this episode. Like, but thanks for coming along with us. I know this is a hard topic to talk about and hard topic to listen to, but I appreciate you guys.
Hey, from all of us here at the Dudes and Dads podcast, we thank you guys. It's been a good one, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks for the next episode, number 4 coming out. So stay tuned. Love you all. Grace and peace.